I shaped this soprano ukulele neck with mostly hand tools, but now that I want to make 5 or 6 at a time, I need to find a way to speed up this whole process. If you're just making 1 or 2 ukuleles, then it's probably best to just use a few hand tools, some rasp files or a Shinto file and some sandpaper, chisels, and the like. Of course, if you're making hundreds of instruments, then you're talking about some sophisticated machinery and some sophisticated money. There is an in-between area where you might want to make, say, a few at a time, perhaps on a continuing basis, and in that case, you might want a few power tools and some specialized jigs for consistency and to help speed things up. The neck-making jig that I'm building is very common. There's many of them on YouTube, and if you decide to go this route, I suggest you spend some time checking them out, since everyone seems to make them slightly different. I've even seen plans for sale. All the ones I've seen are for making guitars, and the one I'm making here is just for soprano and tenor ukuleles. Hi, I'm Paul. This is OpenWoodShop.com, and today's video is part 1 about making ukulele necks. I'm going to be working on a jig today to help make these ukulele necks faster and with a more consistent quality. With this method of making necks, it's important to standardize your neck blanks. The way I'm doing it is by cutting my neck blank 2 inches wide and then cutting off pieces for the heel to be glued to one end of the main shaft of the neck. However, I made the box part of the jig a little low, so I had to cut the lower block off the blanks I made. Once I've routed the neck, I'll glue them back on. To cut the scarf joint for the headstock, I used my multi-sled. It's a handy tool for different jobs, and I'll leave a link below if you're interested. Afterwards, I ripped the headstock of the cut in half to about 3/8 of an inch and saved the other half for a clamping coil that I'll need soon. Since I'm making bolt-on necks, the next job after gluing is to cut a tenon and insert a threaded insert into the tenon. For most of the instrument, I use Titebond Original because it is easier to take apart things should they need to be repaired in the future. However, this is something that should never be taken apart, so I use Titebond 3, which is a little more waterproof. It's ready. A few scraps of wax paper to keep the glue off of the clamping cauls, and then don't be stingy with the clamps. For the carriage, I glued 2 pieces of 1/2-inch plywood together. The cradle blocks go on. They fit snugly and can be moved for different lengths of necks. A cam goes on each end of this, and it's really a fiddly part of the project. They determine the shape and size of the carved neck. Had I known better what I was doing as I made this, I might have been able to calculate it so that the cam was exactly twice the diameter of the neck. However, you will still have to remove the cams quite a few times to adjust the size and shape for how you want the neck. I use bungees to hold the carriage in place, and the spacers reduce the friction from the bungees, making it easier to turn the carriage when you're using it. You'll see what I mean shortly. And at last I put a handle on each end. It makes things a little more convenient for me, but they're not really absolutely necessary. The box needs to be sturdily made with slots on the ends to take the carriage in and out. It needs some kind of rails for the router and base to slide on, and a bearing on each end to ride along the cams. I got my bearings out of old rollerblade wheels. I got some of these old rollerblades at a second-hand store a few years ago, and I've been using them for various projects and repairs ever since. The carriage slides up into the slots, and I'm holding it in place with these small bungees, which when doubled up seem to have just about the right amount of pressure. Should anything go wrong while routing, the whole carriage will fall down and away from the router and the spinning bit. The router sits directly on a 1/8 inch plywood base and is surrounded by 1/2 inch plywood to give support and strength to that base. By using 1/8 inch plywood, I can get the router closer to the neck and won't have to extend the router bit out further than what I'm comfortable with. For the first test run, I used double-sided tape or more correctly 2 pieces of masking tape and super glue to attach the blank. Here I'm using a 1/4 inch spiral bit, and my technique for now anyway is to rotate the carriage and do one end and then go down to the other end and rotate. Then come back using half of the bit to cut and the other half of the bit to run alongside what I previously cut. This helps clean up the previous cut and helps to keep the router bit from climb cutting. Most of the dust goes right down into the box, but I decided to cut a dust port into the side. It seems to pick up about half of the dust that drops down, but it also gets a lot of the airborne dust before it escapes from the jig. I may fit a plexiglass top on it later on, but that's a job for another time. My new jig has roughed out the main part of the neck in about 5 minutes, cutting the time dramatically. In the next video, I'll show what I'm doing to speed up shaping the headstock and the heel. At another time, I may upgrade once again, but for now, this is an important first step towards making necks consistently and in a timely fashion. On the next video, I'll be going through what it takes to finish up these necks. Thanks for following me around the shop as usual, and now go make something.